I'll organize my thoughts into two broad conceptual categories. So I think if we want to understand the decline of liberal democracy, first let's stipulate what do we mean by decline, right? And again, I'm thinking out loud and it hasn't been specified. I mean, what do we mean by decline, right? I think with the recent elections in the US and across the Europe, what we see, the pluralist political expression has been suppressed and it has been labeled as maybe anti America if you disagree with the status quo or you critique politics on ideological lines. And again, the immigrants have been scapegoated and so forth. So that idea that a critique and pluralism of perspective is part and parcel of liberal democracy is under threat in some ways. Now, why we observe all of these factors in my reading, and again, as a political economist, I think there are two major factors. Of course, uh, I don't want to reduce it to these two factors. The politics, economics, culture, ideology over-determine each other. But the two factors, in my understanding, one is the rise in economic inequality, which Dr. Abbas spoke earlier with the rise of neoliberalism. And the second, I think, is the center left and moderate and centrist has exhausted themselves, right? They have not offered an alternative. So in terms of rise of inequality, since 90s, millions of people lost their jobs in the US and across the global north. And at the same time, the wealth of 1% has increased, right? And we heard this story many times. The rising inequality is an obvious factor here. According to recent Oxfam report, the billionaire class made around $5.7 billion per day. Their net wealth increased by that amount in the past year, whereas the working class wages have been stagnant, middle class has been also squeezed. So there is a discontent among large segment of population against this prevailing neoliberal economic order, which is, in very simple terms, is you use the term fundamentalist. I don't know in which context, but I think it's a market fundamentalism of the neoliberalism where there's an uncritical worship of markets, right? And assuming that they offer a solution to every single problem. And that's where the center left parties or these centrist, they only offer to mild down this economic distress that neoliberalism offered. They did not challenge the fundamental premise of neoliberal economic order. And that's where I think you mentioned Clinton, Blair, and so forth. So in this scenario, rising inequality, the rise of oligarchs, you cannot have uh, the more sophisticated form of liberal democracy where you keep the discourse of pluralism, multiculturalism. Now, immigrants have been scapegoated and uh, leftist, radical, every anyone who disagrees with the hegemonic right-wing ideology is now labeled as radical left. And coming from Pakistan, we can relate to that, right? So whenever you want to discredit someone, you frame them as anti-state. So recently, one example, one of the congressperson uh, was made a tweet and then a Republican senator said we should go back or deport her, right? She's an American naturalized citizen. So this is unheard of. I mean, it's more like maybe we are bringing this uh, negative thing with us from Pakistan, right? I'm just a joke, right? We try to escape that, but now we're in the US and we're noticing similar trends. So yeah, liberal democracies in doldrums, and I think these two are key factors, among others.